Well, thanks for tuning in.
Okay.
Al, I haven't heard from you, but I can hear you, I can see that you're there. So I hope you're good. You might still be on the bike, on the
No, I'm
turbo
here.
trainer. Solid, mate. Well, yeah. So tonight we're just going to have a quick chat, and there's a few people reached out earlier on today and said they couldn't make it, so we're going to record it. But essentially, we're just trying to, I guess, facilitate the process of trying to be as successful as possible within the journey that is trail and ultra running. And obviously, leading up to Pilliga Ultra, we want to make sure that everyone has the resources and the information they need to have the best experience they can when they get out to Pilliga Ultra, because in turn that makes everyone's day usually a lot happier, and the event will just run a lot smoother as a result of everyone being very, very happy at a finish line. And yeah, so I'm up in lockdown in regional Victoria, which is great, and I hope everyone else is doing all right where they are. And yeah, so, and just before we get going, you always want to make sure that wherever we are, we just want to acknowledge the traditional custodians upon the lands where we are today, and pay respects to the elders past, present and emerging. So obviously you all know why For Wild Places exists, and it's just something that we always want to make sure we're conscious of, working with For Wild Places. So we always want to lead with our mission, because we know that it's why we're all here, and it's why we all want to participate in events such as Pilliga. And so within that, just to touch on that a little bit further, we really want to tackle these things and really want to bring these things to light within the trail running community as well. So protecting wild places is obviously, as the heading says, but preserving cultural areas and areas of cultural significance is huge. Making sure that trail running becomes synonymous and seamless with the need to have conservation and protect biodiversity. And also we want to make sure that we are a really well represented community in trail running. So we really want to make sure that diversity is something that we really focus on too. So tonight we were going to have a little chat about nutrition. Okay. And nutrition is really important in trail and especially ultra running. When I first came into the sport, a very good friend of mine, he said that ultra running is just like a picnic with a bit of running in between. And it paints a really good picture of what you need to do out there when you're trying to run, do endurance events. So, when you're starting to do things like 20 kilometers and 50 kilometer races, you start to really rely on supplementing what you're putting out throughout your time out on the trail. So it's really important to make sure that whilst you expend energy through running and hiking and climbing over rocks and all the other fun things that will be involved at Pilliga, once you expend energy doing that, you need to replace that energy as well. So the treadmill keeps going and your legs keep moving. But also it's really important to understand that so your mind keeps working really well also, because it's a really good sign that you might be lacking in a bit of fuel, or you might need to take on something, is if you start to get really negative in your mind, or you start to have really big doubts and things like that with your mind. It's a really good sign that you might be low on like your blood glucose, and it's time to take something on to help kind of get you through what's ahead. So if you break down nutrition throughout running, you can kind of look at it in these 4 different areas. So there's things like solid foods, then there's confectionery, which can be solid essentially, but like very like easy to digest, or very minimal in what they are, basically just sugars, right? And then you've got like semi-liquid, things like gel and maple syrup, honey. And then you've got liquid, which is like powder, and you can really just kind of dissolve that into a liquid. So it's like you're drinking water, but it's got calories and it's got salts in it. So here's some things I prepared earlier. Obviously got a bread roll, this is how bad and boring my sandwiches are, but this is solid food and you can eat that trail running. So that's no worries. Like, you just eat that like you normally do. So that's great. You've got things like dates. Dates can work. That's solid food. Fruit, solid food. You can eat that whilst you're running. And then we've got these other things that are really, really well designed. And these are like energy bars, right? You got things like Cliff bars. Patagonia does a bar as well. And these are all things, all of these solid foods, you can use these as food on the run, okay? The trick is, all of this is really good to eat, but the thing is whilst you're running, your body's working at an intensity where it's trying to divert all of its resources towards your muscles and your legs to keep moving. I'm gonna get rid of this sound I'm doing now. So what happens is your digestive system doesn't get much attention from your body, okay? So if you eat solid foods while you run, what can happen is, because your body doesn't focus on digesting them that well, you can get upset stomach and you can get GI distress, right? And that is one of the biggest and main causes. I think it's the main cause for not finishing a trail run or an ultra distance run. People get an upset stomach. It's just so uncomfortable that you don't want to move, and you just have to stop and completely chill out and just completely reset your body to then be able to go again. So solid foods are great if you can handle it within your own personal body, okay? And that's the biggest thing about nutrition, is that it's very, very personal to you. It's got everything to do with, your ability to tolerate all sorts of foods, and also your ability to practice with it, and everything to do with nutrition is personal to you. So there's a lot of great marketing out there that will tell you that this is all you need or that's all you need, but you need to trial it and you need to test that it works for you specifically, okay? Because, so as we move down the chain, like, if you don't want to eat solid food because it doesn't work for you, because you understand that you just like, you're not someone who can eat a meal and then go running half an hour later. Some people can do that, right? Because that's them and they might have practiced it, but who knows? So then you can start to work down the chain of like, this is still a solid food. These are just energy. These are called shot blocks, and they're just little gums, right? And these are still solid, essentially, just like a gummy bear or anything like that. But it's just sweets and lollies, okay? So these are obviously going to be a little bit more easy to digest because they're small in size. You don't really have to you don't really have to deal with them so much in your digestive system. So that's the second option for what you can trial to see if it works. Then we've got things like gels. Like these are gels. We've all seen gels before. Maybe not. Sorry, I shouldn't assume. But these are gels, right? And gels are like a thick liquid, right? It's kind of, it's like maple syrup. It's like honey. And what these do is these save your body from having to digest things, okay? So this is like, you just put it in your mouth and you basically drink it. You might want to put this in your mouth. You want to put a little bit of water with it, wish it around, and then suck it down, okay? So they're the other option, and you can use gels, really, really quick sources of energy, easy to digest. And so when you're running at a high effort or a high intensity, those things are really good to take because they get into your system relatively easy, okay? And then you've got other things like these powders, right? And powders, they're the ones I told you that you just pop into water. So you've got like a 500 ml bottle of water. You just pour in some of this powder, which is like basically just sugar. And then happy days, you're basically drinking water and getting your calories at the same time. Okay, so there's one thing to note about that is that can be problematic if you need to take on a certain amount of water because of the conditions. Say it's like super hot or it's super cold. When your calories and your energy is tied into having to drink, it might cause problems later on. So it's like -5 and you're running in the snow, you're probably not going to really drink that much because you don't need to, essentially. You're not sweating that much. You're not losing a lot of fluid. But you are running, so you are burning energy. So, but if all of your energy input is tied to your water, well, you're not going to get energy because it's in your water and you don't want to drink it. So you've got to really understand how you're using that specifically. Okay. Now that's a whole can of worms to get into, but just understand that it seems like a really good option because like, oh yeah, great. All I do is drink water. I don't even have to essentially like digest a whole lot of stuff. I don't have to chew. I don't have to get like gummy bears stuck in my teeth that I'm picking out for the next 3 kilometers. Like all of that's gone because you just put it in water and you drink it. Happy days. Well, it's great up until a certain point. You've got to understand how that works for you. Okay. And that's a really big thing. And so the other thing is, when are we going to take on all of these things? Well, you've got to understand how much energy you're expending and how to put that energy back in. Okay. And then what's happened if you burn 500 calories an hour? Well, ideally, you want to put 500 calories back into your body, and then essentially you can run forever because, you know, until your legs break and they fall off. Sorry, Hillary, I didn't mean to say break legs. Hillary's on the call and she unfortunately broke her leg on the weekend. So I didn't mean to say break your legs. Your legs would just fall apart, you know what I mean? So if you're expending energy and you put energy back in, happy days, you can keep going and keep going. But it's very, very difficult because if you expend 500 calories and you try and put 500 calories back in, that's a lot, right? And that's going to really probably upset your stomach, okay? And so the key is to figure out how you can close that gap between the amount of energy that you expend and the amount of energy that you can put in and absorb, okay? So that's the key. I know there's an ultra runner and he's very, very good. And the way he tests this theory out is he just runs and he runs really hard and he takes on as many gels as he can until he throws up. And he's like, cool, well, I had 7 gels before I had to throw up. So happy days, like that's my limit. That's where I figure out where I have to stop. You know, and that's a pretty extreme way of doing it, but it works. And that's the key with it all, right? Is like, you've got to understand how it works for you. So again, how do you practice all of this? Like, how do you do that? Well, in your training is the key, right? Because you don't want to try anything new on race day, all right? So do it in your long runs, because long runs are a perfect kind of scenario that's similar to a race in terms of your effort and things like that, usually. You can do it just before sessions like tempo runs, okay? So you don't have to be out there for 5 hours to test what your nutrition is. You might only be out for like a 45-minute run or an hour run. And, you know, you can just take on a gel and just see how it feels in your body when you're moving along. Okay. And also you've got to understand how you're going to carry all of this stuff. So like, where am I going to put this? You know, like, where am I going to put this like half a kilo of dates that I want to carry because that's what I want to eat? But you got to understand, like, where do you put that in your bag and on your body when you carry it? Okay. That's why vest packs are super handy. And making sure that you put it somewhere where it's accessible is a really, really big thing, because you might think that, oh, it's cool. If it's in my back, I'm just going to reach around and grab it and I'll pull it out and I'll eat it. But 9 times out of 10, if you're in an event and you're running, what will happen is like, you'll be like, oh, those dates are in the back of my pack and I really can't be bothered. I'll get them out later. And then that time ticks on. And then next thing you know, you haven't eaten for 30 minutes. And then you're like expended a whole bunch of energy in that 30 minutes. You haven't put anything in, and that can trip you up. So you got to understand how you're going to carry it and what's practical for you. So, you know, on race day, don't try anything new, and think about how if you've got to carry like 5 hours worth of nutrition and you can't do that for whatever reason, like understand if the race has drop bags or whatnot, and understand if what there's available at aid stations, because aid stations might mean that you don't need to carry everything. Okay, so aid stations are a really key one, and just find out what's available. I think at Pilliga it's going to be things like fruit and gels, mainly gels and shot blocks are going to be there, and also some bars. So there's a heap of stuff there. Okay, they're going to be there. And as I mentioned before, trial and error is like the key to understand what works for you is by testing it out. And so you've got to go out there, you've got to think about what might work for you, or think about what you've done in the past. Like if you've eaten something and gone for a run, like just think about how you can incorporate that into your actual run and just test it out. Make notes, take notes, understand it. Super important. Super, super important. Okay, so hydration, right? Hydration is another huge thing, especially in running, because like energy, you sweat, okay? And so if you're letting go of fluids, well, the best way for your body to operate as a human body is to make sure it gets fluids back into itself if it loses it, right? I don't know what the stats are, Paige or Elle or someone else, Hillary, chime in, but like our body is something like 60% water or something like that. So water is like a pretty critical thing in the human body, okay? Running or not, like we need to have water. So you really need to understand in the type of conditions that you're running, how much water you're likely going to be losing when you go running, okay? So if you're in a really hot climate, well, obviously you're going to lose more. So you're going to need to drink more to replace that. If you're in a really cool climate, well, it's one of those things where like you're going to be a lot cooler. So you're probably not going to sweat as much. So you probably don't need to take on as much. Sorry, Al, were you going to say something? All right, cool. Chime in whenever. One way you can do this is understand, like, you can do like a 1 hour sweat test, which is something that a guy called Daryl Griffiths told me, and I did it with him before. He runs the company called Coda and does a lot of sweat testing, salt testing and things like that, which is like highly recommend you check out his literature and resources. So you can weigh yourself, right? Before you go for a run, you can weigh yourself and then take that measurement, go for a 1 hour run at like, 6 to 7 out of 10 effort. So you're working, get back from the run, make sure you dry all the sweat off of you. You can weigh yourself again, and then you'll get a difference in your weight. And that weight calibrates to your loss in sweat. So you've got to weigh yourself with no clothes on. And then when you get back from your run, same thing. Dry yourself, no clothes, weigh yourself. And so if you've lost 500 grams of weight in that run, well, that equates to 500 milliliters of water. So half a liter of water that you've sweated out over 1 hour. And what that does is it gives you an understanding. If you record the temperature conditions, say it was 20 degrees and a humidity of 20, it gives you an understanding of like how much you might sweat if you are out on a run. So you've lost 500 grams, which is 500 mils. So you need to put that back in. And that's for you to obviously operate optimally. Okay. So that's a long process to understand, but it's one of those things, like some people just seem to never sweat and some people seem to sweat profusely, and you know who they are because they are just covered in like sweat and they're wet and after every single run. And some people get a lot of salt around their face and stuff like that when they go for a run. Well, that's a sign that they probably sweat a lot of salt out as well. So all of these things are like really, really important to see and understand, so you can know what works best for you. And also, if you get just really thirsty when you're out running, well, that's probably a sign too, because I'm pretty sure that's like our body's natural way of telling us, hey, you should probably drink something. So all these things are really important. And so, yeah, salt and electrolytes, I would say for me, like in my experience within running, I'd say it's a critical factor as well. I would highly recommend anyone to go out and run for like 10 hours and then not take any salts or electrolytes, and just see how you feel, mate. And like, that's what I mean. Like it's very, very personal. I think it's very, very critical, but not everyone does. They may have a low sodium sweat concentration, so they don't sweat out as much sodium, and so they don't need to put much in. But I'd say it's very critical. You can get it in a number of ways. Like a lot of these powders have salts in it sometimes. Some gels have salts in it. So you just need to understand what's there. You can get these tabs. They're just little tabs you throw in your water. And so you just got to understand how you can use them best for you. And also just plain salt can sometimes work. And there's a lot of stuff that, you know, if you've got at aid stations, sometimes there's like roast potato and there's like a bowl of salt. You can get a roast potato, dunk it in. So you need to understand what's available in the food that you're eating too. And that's all just like, again, understanding what's at the, it's really good to understand. So I'm just looking at questions here. I know what Elle said. I've heard that as well. Yeah. So Hillary mentioned that like a doctor once told her that if you're thirsty, you're already dehydrated. And for sure, like the same goes with eating. Like if you're hungry, if you feel hungry, you're probably already a little bit behind the bowl. So they're like really good things to use during your training to understand what works best for you and your needs as a runner, as an athlete, as a person. Okay. So yeah, salt can come through a number of different ways: tablets, tabs, food. And so you want to get an understanding of how much of that you want to have per hour. Too much is not something you want to do. Too little is not something you want to do. You just want to find a sweet spot, and you can get tested for that as well. But another way to figure that out, which I've never really tried personally, but I've heard it recommended a number of times, is that if you're unsure exactly how much you want to put in your water when you're running or how much salt you want to take on, you can just get like a 500 ml bottle or whatever bottle or hydration you use and put a form of salt in there to test it out, be it a tab or salt itself. And if it tastes too salty, then that's your body telling you, well, it's too much salt. If you can't taste any of the salt, well, then it's probably not enough. So you want to find that balance where you're tasting the salt, but it's not overpowering. And that's just, again, your body's natural way of saying, hey, like there's the salt that I need, or that's too much salt. I don't need it. So that's just something. And again, trial and error, again, is 100% the best way to test all of this out. And yeah, I just want to make a note though, that like hypernatremia is when you drink too much water, right? And that is something you want to 100% avoid. It's like so much, it's so bad. Okay. So just make sure that if you're in an event, you're not scared of becoming too hydrated. Okay. And then because of that, you just drink all the time, because what that can do is very, very like, it's just super bad for your body, and you don't want to go that. So I'd 100% encourage everyone to look up hypernatremia, and check that out. Hypernatremia, yeah, that's the one. So you want to check that out. And also like it all falls into the same categories as like complete dehydration and then overhydration. So understanding that is just something you should do if you're trying to do endurance events, okay? Because it's your body, it's your health. It's really, really important. So salts, water, they're huge, go together, they can be apart, but highly recommend testing them out. One thing I found that works really, really well, and I'm not 100% sure why, and I'm sure a lot of people do, but it's sometimes if I'm running and I feel like my stomach is a bit like it's sloshing around, or I can hear the water sloshing around, or like I'm not digesting whatever I'm eating that well, I'll just make sure I take some salts. And when I take some salts, that makes me realize like, that makes my stomach like absorb the things that are in there a lot easier. So it's just one of those little tricks, you know. If I'm like, oh, my stomach's sloshing about, take a couple of salt tabs, or just make sure I get some electrolytes in, and it kind of settles it off, which is super, super good. And things like, you know, sometimes they're available at aid stations, sometimes not. Sometimes there's plain water, sometimes there's mixed things available. And so you just got to understand when you come into an aid station, you know which one you're going for. And I'd always recommend, if you're ever running with like a water bottle with electrolytes, always make sure you've got one with electrolytes and one with plain water, because having plain water is just super handy to just cleanse your palate, just kind of refresh you up. You can spray it on your face. Like it's just so like you always want to have a little bit of plain water, because it's just something that that is super handy. And and kind of make sure that you've just got that there. It's a little trick that like never seems to fail. Cool. And there's so many resources out there, like I mentioned before. So like there's a crew at Pillars, and they do a bunch of work, a number of podcasts and things like that with nutritionists to speak about like eating and nutrition for training and also in events. I Run Far always does a good thing. Fast Running, they put a lot of good stuff out there. And I've got down here BASE, and BASE, that is an organization. It's part of Monash University down in Melbourne, and they do a lot of testing on ultra endurance running and nutrition and stuff like that. So BASE stands for Be Active, Sleep and Eat, I believe. And they've got a bunch of stuff. The guy who heads up that department is super into ultra running and stage races and stuff. And they do a lot of things around nutrition for running. So highly recommend checking out that crew and the information they put out there. And yeah, it's just, it's again, super personal. One of those things that you need to test out everything yourself. And people will come to you generally with advice. And that's really, really good and really, really handy. And all of these products that are here and all these things that you can use, they're just options. So you just need to understand what is the advice and what are the options that work best for you, and then incorporate them into your journey. And that's the best way to figure it out, and don't get too, if you've tried it and it works for you, then keep using it until it doesn't work for you. And then think about, where you're going to get your next bit of advice or where you're going to get your other options from. And that's kind of like, really, that's like the advice I would give as a very kind of entry level way of looking at nutrition and hydration. These is like, I swear to God, people do PhDs on this, and then they'll probably do more PhDs on the same topic. It's just one of those things that it's just never ending. So figure out what works for you. Do your own research, do your own study, and it's gonna get you very close to where you need to be. And then likely your body's just going to change because you grow older or whatever, and then you have to figure it all out again, which is part of the journey and part of the fun. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Like I don't want this to go on for too long. I've already spoken a ton. That sandwich made my mouth really dry. And so yeah, has anyone got any questions?
That's good, thanks, Madge. I thought, I like your advice on the hydration and the salt, and it's good advice. Thank you for that.
No worries, Richard. And Paige just said that there's a podcast called The Long Munch. It's really good. Some dietitians from Melbourne who do a podcast episode with an expert from a particular topic, then an athlete with experience in that area, all focused on endurance sports. So nice one. Thanks, Paige. Available on all your podcast platforms. There's also another good podcast called Stokely. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. Really good. I'd highly recommend checking it out every day of the week. Does anyone else have any questions? Short and sharp. That's how we're doing it here for Wild Places. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of, it's just a process. It's I was in a community group chat the other day, and someone wrote a message in there and said, if you're not training if you're not eating and drinking and practicing nutrition while you're training, are you really preparing for an ultra? And there was a number of replies saying, no, you're definitely not. So it's all part of that. Running becomes as equally important as eating and drinking when you start to run a lot longer. And yeah, I dare say that a few snacks during the Pilliga Ultra or 50K or the 20K, it would be very, very handy. So highly recommend practicing them with them. Cool. So yeah, is there anything else? Anyone got any questions? Vic, I know you've been scribbling away there. Radical. Well, if there's no questions, obviously you can just, there's Steve and Stephen M. Hey dudes, you're late. I'll send you the recording. I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed. It's been a comedy show. I ate a roll and it was pretty good. So I think we'll wrap it up there. Obviously, this is going to be available on so many platforms. I don't even know how many, but and thanks heaps for joining in. I hope you all learned something. And if you didn't, it's not my fault.
Thanks, Madge. Much appreciated.